And we're live. There we go. Welcome to the premiere of Dark Horse Paranormal Podcast Live. A lot of people may not know this, that we actually have had a podcast for a while called Dark Horse Paranormal Podcast. Mm-hmm. And we decided to add a show, a live stream version of it. And this is the premiere. So we're pretty excited, right?
Yes, we are. Yes, we are.
And it's pretty interesting. And then we got a great guest for you guys tonight. And you might be wondering, like, you know, why have two shows? Like, why not just call it Bigfoot and the Bunny? And I'm sure some of you know we have a show on every Saturday that's on the Paranormal United Network, as well as our own pages called Bigfoot and the Bunny. And we thought we would do like a more relaxed version of it. Sure. I don't know. Is it okay to like tell dick jokes or something on this?
Well, I think you do that already on Bigfoot and the Bunny.
I do kind of do that. That's true.
Yeah.
That's true. Can we talk about...
Oh.
Yeah. Oh, we still can't say that word.
No, it's not really in my vocabulary, but I think you already do that as well. So.
But it's so funny. I was like looking for a sound clip today, and to you do that little joke there about the pussycat or whatever you want to call it. And I was like going through all these sound files, and my cat was going bananas. He was jumping up on the table, knocking things over, and he's growling and like, oh, yeah.
All right.
Come on now. It's not too bad.
Yeah.
But, yeah. So I guess we're going to be a little bit more focused on the paranormal, like do more data maybe in this show and get into more haunting stuff, where I think Bigfoot and the Bunny is kind of like, we're pretty widespread. We're covering
for the guests,
a lot of topics, you know.
Yeah,
I think some of the shows will just be like chat and like talking, and hopefully a lot of audience interaction. Mm-hmm. You know, and we'll go there. And yeah, I see. Yeah, we got some people out there. Gina Lynn, Andrea Carr. Hey guys.
Hello,
Courtney, of course.
Hello, Courtney.
Paranormal United Network, Pun TV, and I want to give a big thank you to them for giving us the opportunity to be on, which is awesome. And
they've got a lot of great hosts as well.
They do. It's an awesome network. We love being part of it.
Yes, we do.
It is truly the most, you know, Paranormal United type network I have come across. Mm-hmm. People talk about para unity, and it usually doesn't mean shit. And with these people, it really does. Cool. It really does. I mean, they really just everybody supports each other, and I love it. I also want to say congratulations to my friend Clarissa Vasquez, our friend, who's getting engaged to Steele Graham. Mm-hmm. And I swear that's like a porn name or something. Congratulations,
it's already
Clarissa.
Starting. Here we
go. Clarissa and I wrote a book a while back called this: Debunking Common Paranormal Myths, Exploring Psychosomatic Pareidolia. And she is actually a friend of mine that got me into doing this radio stuff. So congratulations, Clarissa. That's great news. And wish you the best with Mr. Steele Graham.
It's not us.
Sunshine Steele's an awesome dude. That is so cool. What else we got here?
Don't mind me. Like I've said on Bigfoot and the Bunny, I tend to the comments and stuff, so I have to make sure that everything's working and going well on the computers. It's really not.
Computers. How's it going?
It's not.
It's not really going. You know, that's what we do. So, what was I going to say? So how else can we make the show different, you think?
I don't know. Why don't we ask our listeners?
What do you guys think? You know, tell us in chat. Like, what do you want to see? Like, what's different for you? If you're not familiar, again, Dark Horse Paranormal Podcast is an existing podcast. We've got a ton of episodes out there. Anywhere you get your podcasts, you can go and check those out. And we're obviously going to be adding to it. And we got a little undisciplined with it as we got busy with Bigfoot and the Bunny.
Yeah.
And it's sad. So we wanted to breathe some life there and get that rolling. One of the themes is the kind of the music stuff we like. We like rock and metal and everything.
Yes, when you start listening to it, you will go, what the heck?
Right.
We sing in it.
You heard the introduction music, I actually wrote like, I don't know,
he did
12 years ago.
Yeah.
I recorded that and brought it back to
Yeah, and it's
to
actually
that podcast.
your kids are laughing when they were little in the
when
background.
They were little, and that's why their voices
little,
are really
so-
high. You know,
Yeah.
like, yeah.
So it's nice to have an original.
Right? You should hear Logan now. You know, he's got a
he's
deeper voice than I do.
God.
How you doing, Dad? he's got a deeper voice than me, and he's taller than me. But at the time, he was probably like 3 feet high and just giggling.
Yeah.
Like, what are you doing? So,
but I think
time
that's
goes by.
it's really good that you and Chris has been wanting to change it, and I'm like, no, don't change the music. That's like real, genuine stuff right there. Never change that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
So-
indeed. I see some chat out there. Andrea Carr,
She's been
Paranormal can be
hunting.
crazy, seen shit. Congrats. I've never met you. I've never met you either, Andrea, though we
Yeah.
share the same last name. You may be a cousin. And that's not a totally bad thing.
No,
No, I don't think so.
no, not at all.
Although I got some shady cousins, so I don't know.
Not
But I'm not going to count you as one of them.
That's what I was just gonna say, Christopher.
Not at all.
That's in your general direction. Your mother was a hamster, and your father smelt of elderberries.
What?
It's true, Andrea. Might be.
No.
Might be
I
related.
got no hamsters in my family. And I said hamsters. Wow, it slipped out.
Yeah.
It's showing our New England accent. We're from New England, if you guys don't know. And, she says marriage name. Well, tell your husband, no hamsters.
Hi, Irene.
I love you, and thank you for joining our chat. We appreciate it.
Thank you, Andrea.
And we see Irene out there. I see
Yep.
again, Jeannie Lynn. Awesome. So we got a great guest for you guys tonight. Her name is Lynn Monet, and she's the author of two of the books that are about the scariest haunting. I mean, one of the scariest hauntings that I've come across. The books are Omnipresent and Omnipresent What Happened Next. She's a Florida native. She was born in Sarasota, Florida, and raised in Palm Beach County. She currently resides in the Travelers Rest, South Carolina. Excuse me. She's a mother of 3. She has been a nurse for 35 years. Lynn specialized in medical surgery, urology, in the last 17 years in geriatrics. Lynn currently works in a management position in a nationwide insurance company, is now an author. Has been. This is actually an old bio because we've had Lynn on before.
Mhm.
We loved talking to her, and we were excited to bring her back onto the show. Let's bring her on. Lynn Monet. Hey, Lynn. How are
Welcome
you?
back.
Hi, it's great to be here. And I love your setup. Thank you for having me.
Thank you.
Thank you. You're very welcome, and thank you for
Mhm.
coming back, and welcome.
It's my pleasure.
What is going on? You
Well,
have a couple of books on this omnipresent haunting. Omnipresent was a very scary book.
Okay, so I have a story to that. So my mom loves horror. Stephen King's one of her favorite authors.
Mhm.
And I bought your book for her and sent it to her. She lives in Florida as well. And I sent it to her, and it was back in February. She said to me, she kept giving me phone calls within 3 days. Are you sure this is real? This whole thing was real? Yes, Mom. She'll call me back. She goes, this is nonfiction, right? Yes, Mom. I tell you, by the end of the 3 days, that book scared the hell out of her. She said that's one of the scariest things she ever read. Yep. She was asking me questions about you, like how you were now, and how are our kids? And yeah.
Yeah, that's kind of the reason that I did the sequel, because a lot of people came forward. And for anybody that's new on the show, the book Omnipresent was written about a house that I bought about 13 years ago that I was only able to spend 2 nights in and never was able to live in. It was that bad. So I wrote the sequel of Omnipresent, What Happened Next, and the very first chapter is called The Last Chapter First. So it picks up where I left off with moving from the house, and found some interesting things about that. So do you want for me to tell a little bit about Omnipresent first?
Sure. Just to give a little history to people who didn't listen to the first podcast.
Exactly.
Okay.
Maybe bring it back. Yep.
Yeah, I'd love to. Omnipresent. I was a single mother at the time, recovering from a divorce and bad credit. So I was living in a single wide mobile home with my two small children at the time, age 7 and 13. And came across, after looking for a year with a realtor, having her drag me around and me always wanting to take a week to think about it. So then, I'd come forward and be in my price range. Most of the time the houses would be sold. But this house came onto the market. Well, it actually didn't even get onto the market. She called me when her colleague was getting ready to post the pictures on the MLS and said, Lori, Lynn, you've got to, come and see this house. This house is in your price range and it is too good to be true. And I should have kind of gone with what she told me with the too good to be true. But I was thrilled because here's this a house that sounds wonderful, the things that she was telling me. So I went to her office. And while we were driving over, I'm looking through the papers and I'm questioning it because this house could have easily have sold for $100,000 more than what it was selling for. So I thought maybe they had made a mistake on the price and asked her to call and double check. I asked if there were any sinkholes or garbage dumps or some stinky paper mill next to it because I couldn't imagine why the price would be so low. And it turned out that there was the price. According to her, the family had moved, so it was move-in ready, which even made it a better deal for me. And supposedly the family had relocated to somewhere else and they were now paying 2 mortgages and they were motivated sellers. So I had gone over to see the house and there was a problem with the lock. There were problems with the lock consistently throughout the story because there were 3 demons in the home. And 2 demons in the home and a young man that had actually hung himself in the house. And I'm kind of jumping forward because I know we have a certain
right.
I'm going to be able to fit both in. So when one of the demons monopolized the lock area and would run the stairwell out of the 2 demons. And so when I finally got a chance to enter into the house, the realtor was trying to get the key back out of the lock because she finally had to fight to get it open. And as I'm walking up the stairs out of my peripheral vision, I glanced this young man hanging in the stairwell. And of course, it was like, I looked directly at it and there was nothing there. So I'm thinking to myself, this is so horrible. Why would I even think of something like that? Mm-hmm. So it ends up that I decide to make an offer on the house. After going through it, I wanted to bring my children back one more time to look through the house. So I met with her about 4:00 that afternoon with my children in tow. And of course, my son's running around the yard. Mommy, when are we going to get there? I love this house when we get there. And
they're all excited.
They ran down the hallway, picking out their bedrooms and stuff like that. And I told the realtor at that time that I wanted to make an offer because, again, so many times I had waited to think about it and then I would go back to do it a week later and the house was gone. So when she went to call in the fact that I was going to be making an offer, someone else had already made an offer that day. And I'm like, oh my gosh. So I've got to make a good offer. So I said a little prayer and started, the paperwork to make the offer. And my son and daughter come to me and they're like, well, can we go look downstairs? And I'm like, well, of course, go look downstairs. And about 5 minutes later, my daughter's back up there and she says, Mom, I do not like this house. I do not want to move here. And I was kind of taken back. First of all, I'm embarrassed because I'm standing here with this poor realtor lady that's been dragging me around for a year trying to help me find a house.
And how old is she at this point?
And she was 13. My daughter was
13 years old. Yep.
Yeah. And here's my teenager, not wanting to move here. And at first I was so baffled by it. I asked her, I said, what did you say? And she repeated it. She said, there is something about this house that I do not like. I don't want to live here.
Yeah, she could feel it.
She could. It's very unusual. She should have been like really excited and happy and like she was initially. And to turn that quickly, it's like maybe she saw something as well, like you did, like that peripheral where you see some sort of vision or something and you go, did I really see that? And you question yourself.
Yes, that's true. And I should have listened. But, in that moment here, we had been living in a single wide. That single wide could have fit 4 times in this house. It was a 2,400 square foot house, 2-story, brick house with
Wow.
a split level. As a matter of fact, the second book that I sent you with the Omnipresent What Happened Next, that is an actual picture of the house. It's a beautiful house. And
Mhm.
there's a face in the window looking out that you can also see on that cover. There's a tree in the front yard, but it's off-centered, and some people think that it's a reflection from the tree, but if they realize that that tree had just been planted, it was a dwarf tree, and that window was up on the second floor, there's no way that that could have reflected on there that
I
way.
see. Yeah.
You
I
know,
remember asking you that last time.
I
Yeah.
remember we talked about that. And the thing about the house, and you don't have it up on the screen, is it's kind of like a house you would see in the suburbs. It doesn't look, it's not a Victorian mansion. It's not something from like, the 1800s. It is just a straight up house you might see just driving down the street in the suburbs. And then all these things happen.
It is a nice house. Yeah, it's
They're
beautiful.
very nice. Yeah.
yeah, it's true. It is just a regular looking house. And of course, for me, you know, I was so proud as a single mother to be able to provide such a nice home for my children that I really, really wanted it to work out. So I ignored a lot of things to, like the guy hanging in the stairwell would have probably sent most people out the door screaming. But of course, I really want, you know, this house. So I went ahead and I made a bid, and obviously they took mine over anybody else's, and we got to the closing at that point, and the people were late getting there, and there was a reason which I found out after the fact, which I'll tell you a little bit farther in when we get to the second book, because I actually did reach out and find the people that sold me the house after I sold it. So that was an interesting conversation in itself.
Very
But anyway, so they were late, but the thing is throughout the whole closing, the woman constantly stared at her feet. She sat in the chair, kind of slumped, staring at her feet, and I'm kind of like doing one of these, you know, trying to get into her view range, and she wouldn't look up. And I was telling her how I wanted to put in wooden flooring. She says, "Oh, well, we wanted to do that too." And then in the closing, I found out that they did not move out of state, that their jobs were not transferred, that they actually moved only 20 minutes away to live with her parents, and they were still at the same jobs. So I thought, well, you know, that's kind of weird, you know, that I was told this other story, and that turns out not to be true, but they must be having financial problems or something that's none of my business, and I'm just thrilled to have this house. So I got the keys and took the kids over that night to haul our first load of stuff over, and the key wouldn't work in the door, and I remember thinking maybe they'd given me the wrong keys. And I'm thinking to myself, I can't even call a locksmith at this point because I had just signed the papers. They haven't even been processed through the
Right.
yet. So technically it's not really even mine yet. But so finally we managed to get in there, and I was in the kitchen preparing dinner, and my daughter comes to the kitchen opening, and she said, what did you want? And I said, I didn't call you. And she said, yes, you did. You called me twice, and I said I was coming, and then you called me the second time. And I said, I swear I didn't call you. And she's like, well, I swear that you did. And then my son comes in, he's peering in from underneath her arm, and he's like, Mommy, I heard you too. You know, I heard you call me out too. Yeah. So this thing was mimicking my voice, and it already picked up our names. So I rationalized it. I'm like, oh, well, you know, Brittany's a popular name, and maybe some other mother, it's dinner time, was outside calling for her child to come home, you know, and eat. I mean, it was a dead end street, so there weren't that many people on it, but I thought, well, you know, and eventually you'll probably meet that Brittany and, you know, make good friends, which of course my children liked that idea, and they ran outside, you know, to try to draw attention in the front yard. And so we then packed up and left that night and went home. And the next morning I was coming back. I was going to continue. I was pulling up carpeting, trying, you know, to get it ready for the wooden floors and save a little bit of money. So I went back by myself. And when I went into the house, I went upstairs to the kitchen area, and every single light in that house was on. Including the one inside of the oven. Every single.
Come on.
Yeah. The light inside of the oven, the stove light, and there was no furniture in there yet. It was, other than my son brought his baseball bat to, you know, to kind of stake out his room, and my daughter brought her Nintendo thing or whatever it was. So there were just little things of theirs so that they could mark their territory in the room.
Right.
So, but every single light in that house was on in the garage everywhere. So I'm thinking, okay, the sale happened kind of fast. It never even really got to hit the MLS for very long. Maybe somebody in the neighborhood was entrusted with a key. So I go across the street, introduce myself to the neighbors, and ask, do you know if anybody in the neighborhood's been entrusted with a key? Because when I left last night, I could have sworn that there were no lights on, but when I come over today, all of the lights were on. Did you see maybe a realtor pull up that didn't realize that it was sold
Sure.
after we left?
Sure,
And
be a
showed
natural
it?
reaction.
Yeah.
How did that
Something
happen?
like that.
Yeah.
So, and they said that they didn't know of anybody, and so I introduced myself, and so I went back across the street and continued to pull up carpet until it was time to go home and pick up my kids. And then there was a repeat the next day where I and I had some trouble when I was leaving that day that I was there without my kids with the lock, getting it to lock.
Mm-hmm.
So I left, came back the next morning, and I went to put my key into the knob lock, and the door just pushed open. I didn't turn it, nothing. It just pushed open. So I just figured that the reason why I was having a hard time locking the deadbolt lock was because it wasn't in the door jamb pulled all the way.
Mm-hmm.
So I'll go into the house again. This time I have now, brought some paint with me because I wanted, now a lot of the carpeting had been pulled up. I wanted to be able to paint the ceiling. The house was built in the 1970s, 1976 actually it was built.
Mm-hmm.
And it didn't, it needed to be freshened up a little bit. So when I went to put the paint cans down, I went to open up the sliding glass door in the back, and it was unlocked. And the key and everything was the little peg thing, and everything was like dangling off to the side of it. And I thought, I don't remember it being like that, but I must have done it. One of those absent-minded mom things while you're ushering kids out. And so then I went down. Yeah. Go ahead. And so I went down to the garage to open it because I had boxes in the car to unload, and the two doors to the garage were unlocked. But again, I thought, well, I'm used to having the clicky thing in my car. I don't have to deal with making it locked. It goes up and down when I push the button,
Right.
I just didn't have it. So, but the thing that caught me was there was a workshop off to the side, and it had a regular front door on it. And I had, over the couple of days that I'd been coming there bringing items, I'd been stacking the items up against that door. And I mean, there was like 3 feet out and a good distance over. And the chain on that door was dangling to the side. And I'm like, well, wait a minute, there is no way.
It's amazing.
No way.
The stuff about the door.
Yeah.
I'm putting this all together in my head, and it's like, here you are, you're a single mom, you get this opportunity. And it is like a story that we hear in Paranormal, right? Like it's like a little like Amityville, like, well, you can get in for a price. It's kind of a deal.
Yeah.
And you're like, yeah, and you're trying to do for your kids. And then you got this like crazy stuff going on with the door. It's locking, it's unlocking, the keys are breaking in it, I think, at one point, right?
Yeah,
it's all really crazy stuff. And they take a turn for the darker.
Well, and that's true. And the thing about it is I bought the house the end of March. So I decided not to move in immediately. I wanted to do some renovations to it, have the wooden flooring put in. I had some brand new furniture for my children's bedrooms to be delivered. And so I figured there was only 8 weeks of school left for my kids. So I would just let them finish out in their old schools instead of transferring all that paperwork and stuff and getting stuff like. And it was only a 25-minute commute. So, and then that way I figured that they could, meet kids in the neighborhood during the summer and then start fresh at the beginning of the year in their new schools. And so that was my plan. But, when I realized that door was opened in the garage area, I go back over to the neighbor's house and I'm like, wait a minute, because I knew the only way that somebody could have unlocked that was to pull all of the boxes out from the front of the door, unlock the door, and push all of the boxes back exactly the way that I had them. Mm-hmm. So I was sure at that point that somebody had a key to the house. So I went across this, like I said, I went across the street again, and I made mention to the family, did you notice any kids playing in the yard? Was anybody's car here when my car wasn't here? I gave them my name and number and said, I'm going to be having workers coming to do things. However, if there's anybody here and my car is not here with them, please call the police. Here's my phone number. I'll be here in 25 minutes. because there shouldn't be anybody in that house unless I'm, there with them. So they agreed to do that. And the lady said to me, she said, I'm not trying to be a nosy neighbor, but when you left yesterday, she said, I was washing my dishes and I noticed that you were having trouble locking the door. And she said, and you even went halfway to your car and doubled back and went and shook the door with the doorknob to make sure that it was secure. And I had even forgotten about doing that part. So when, she reminded him, like, you know what I did? So it wasn't that it wasn't in the door jamb correctly. It was in there correctly because I was jiggling the door. So more things kind of happen. And it turns out that I end up trying to get the men to come in to do the renovations in the house. And the first one only stays until 2:00 in the afternoon, disappears. He has a reason that he's got, he's doing mine in between jobs and this new big job popped up. So that was reasonable. Then the second one comes and he maybe gets 4 pieces of flooring put down and then he disappears. He leaves his DeWalt tools. He didn't even come back for payment or to pick up his tools. But he said that they had a family member. Yeah, that they had a family member in the hospital. And of course, okay, that's reasonable. So the third person was a friend of mine's cousin. And so I actually got to find out what happened in the house. And he and I were there together when he was doing some work in the house. And I actually, at that point, saw a young man coming up the stairwell into the house. And he was so vivid and so real that I said, did you knock? And the guy in the room thinks that I'm talking to him because we're the only two there. And I'm thinking that this person must be disoriented and they just come walking in the house, or I didn't hear them knocking. And when I turned and looked directly at the person, they of course were gone. There was kind of that waffling to the air. It almost looks like gas vapors when, sometimes the spirit, when they're up that close to you, I see them better out of my peripheral vision and at more of a distance and a certain kind of lighting. But when they are in the room, that's that vapor, like wavering in the midair that you can see.
That's a real thing.
That's a thing.
We've experienced that ourselves.
Mhm.
Where you see somebody just standing there, and I think most people have, and most people write it off, but there are circumstances where you might have saw something a little bit more legit, even though you were changing your focus, whatever. If you see something clear and it's like a figure or a person, it tends to lend credibility to it because it's not just like something in your eye.
Right.
Exactly. And so I realized at that point in time that we had a ghost in the house. And of course, I actually, prior to that, not introduced to one of the demons, but got a run by on one of the demons that were in the house that just, I was frozen. And that, I'll add that in a little bit, but it actually comes before this. But with this young man, I left, and all of a sudden I'm in the car line picking up my kids, and he calls me and he says, I have to leave. I have to leave right now. There's something weird about this house that I've never experienced anywhere before in my life, and the line drops. And so I'm trying to call him back, and it's going to voicemail. Finally, I get a hold of him about an hour later, and I asked him, I said, what happened? And he says, oh, nothing, but I'd really rather just be there when you're there. So when are you coming back? And I kind of explained, well, you know what? I've got furniture coming there. The floors need to be in place so that my kids' bedrooms can be set up. Well, when are you coming back? Well, he never ended up coming back either. So I asked my friend who I worked with, I said, hey, listen, when you see your cousin, will you ask him what happened? He seemed petrified in the first phone call, and I had a feeling that it had something to do with paranormal, and she said that she would ask. So 4th of July comes. He's at her house. He's had a couple of beers, so he's a little talkative. And she asked him point blank. She said, what happened, at Lynn's house? Why did, what happened with that? And he said, oh my God. He said, I'm so sorry. He says, Lynn is such a nice lady. He said, and he says, but there's no way that I would ever go back in that house. It's the F word, ... up. And he said that house was, that house was that. And he said, so he started to tell her what had happened. And he was sitting on a garden seat with 4 wheels. So he would wheel back, he was like sideways sitting on it so that he could kind of move like a crab to the side, and he was putting in the wooden flooring, and he had his trowel and a mallet and a wooden block to kind of tap it in. It was tongue and groove, and he was using adhesive with it. And he put a piece in, and he reached down to get the mallet and the wooden block to gently tap it into place, and they were gone. The tools were gone. And so he's like, okay, well, maybe I rolled over them. They're obviously not there. And so he's scooting, they're not there. So then he kind of turns around and he notices that they're lined up parallel, all three of them, right smack in front of the bedroom door. And he's like, wait a minute.
I didn't do that.
Yeah, I didn't do that. But you know what? The paint, the glue kind of smells funny. And maybe Lori's here playing, Lynn's here playing a joke on me. So he actually got up and looked into the hallway and started, checking to see if I was there. And it spooked him. So he turned on the light, and he had a radio that was battery operated that he then also turned on. And within it, he sits back down, he's got his tools, he goes to put in another piece, and all of a sudden the light shuts itself off, and then his radio shuts itself off, and he can hear the tools moving behind him, and he watched them as they lined up paralleled at that door, and he said that he couldn't get out of the house fast enough.
Oh my gosh, I can't imagine.
Pardon me?
I said, oh my gosh, I can't imagine that feeling. I mean, I can, because we've actually been in stuff like that, but it's him alone, he's by himself, and seeing something like that, it's really scary.
It is very scary. And I did finally get a fourth guy to come over and finish the renovations. But he was stoned all the time. So he carried demons with him, They were his
that's true.
So he didn't see anything. They didn't need to bother him. He already had minions, So
yeah.
And I didn't care what he was high on, just as long as he got the job finished and he wasn't
right.
kids, So I just wanted to get out of there. And so just to back up a little bit and to make mention, there were 2 nights that we spent in the house. One, my daughter Brittany had her best friend Brittany, so the 2 Brittany's come over. She wanted her to spend the night. It was on a school night, and the other Brittany, I'm going to say her friend so that doesn't get confusing. Her friend woke up at around 2 o'clock in the morning and wanted to go home. She had gone to the kitchen to get Oreos, and something spooked her in the kitchen, and then she wanted to go home. And so
yeah, I thought that was interesting. Now this is a younger daughter, right?
She's the 13-year-old.
She's 13. Okay.
Yeah, the youngest one was,
but they're having a sleepover, and it's still very unusual for a kid to want to leave like that.
Right. Yeah, a 13-year-old especially. Yeah, they want to, even on a school night.
Yeah, they're going to be giggling all night, not sleep, and having pillow fights and stuff.
Yeah, exactly. So
talking about toys.
Yep.
Yeah.
Is that what you guys did?
I don't know.
So anyway, she was adamant about it. So finally, like about 3 o'clock in the morning, they came in to wake me because she wanted to leave. And I'm like, oh my God, it's 25 minutes away and your parents are good. I said, let's just call your mom and dad and see, after you talk to them, if maybe you feel better. So she called and they convinced her to stay until 6 in the morning. And I said, look, if you can't sleep, you don't have to, but you just try to lay there and rest the best that you can. So we ended up leaving, and that was pretty uneventful for most of us, at least. Not my children were seeing things, but I was still in denial. Mm-hmm. And so it was the second sleepover that we had that I actually took my dog with us. I had a little black schnauzer named Sally, and she would not go in that house. I finally had to chain her up in the front yard, thinking maybe she had to go to the bathroom. And then I had to carry her into that house while she darted around looking for an exit to get out. And
that's really telling. Animals know. They always know.
And then I found out what happened after the fact, because she showed up in the kitchen where I was, and she was just trembling, and I thought she was cold. So I found a towel and wrapped her up in a towel, and of course she laid on it and wouldn't let me out of her sight. But it turned out that an incident did happen with the children downstairs where the demons presented themselves, and my dog almost dug a hole through the drywall trying to get out of that room. So, because I asked, why are all these claw marks on the wall? And so that second night that we spent the night, the kids had drugged both of the queen size blow up mattresses into the master bedroom, and I had so many rooms started but not finished, that I wanted about a room that I could go into that was completely done. So I picked the master bathroom because it was small. I could paint the ceilings and the walls and be done with it in about 2 hours. And so I went in and I did that. I opened the windows for the kids, made sure I had low fume paint. And, they were watching Hidalgo and fell asleep on their mattresses. So at around 11:30, I finished, and I walked down to the kitchen and to clean up my brushes and things. And when I'm coming out of the kitchen, there's this wrought iron railing, because the split level, you have the stairs that ascend and the descending stairs to the lower level. So the wrought iron railing was blocking the descending stairs for anybody falling off. And that's actually the thing that the kid hung himself from, in that
Actually, we're
house.
going to find out. Yeah.
Yeah.
I just want to say one thing too. You're mentioning that they're demons and stuff. In a way,
Right.
we're kind of jumping the gun with the audience because you didn't know this right away. I mean, all these things led up to, you're becoming aware, and that is the book Omnipresent. You have two, and we're going to get to the second book, what happened after as well.
Right.
But for those who don't know, like when we say, well, that was the demons, it took you a while to come across this, right? I mean, you're experiencing things, and you just see the stuff going on around you. You know something's wrong, but you don't know what to call it yet.
Exactly. Now, this was my first experience on the second night when things started to amp up. And I was coming out of the kitchen, and of course, there's double entry doors on the little foyer stoop area. And I see this thing come up from the lower level across the double entry doors, and it went down, shooting down the hallway. I mean, it came right up the stairs in front of me, shooting down the hallway. And this was a horrific looking thing. It was up on its haunches. I'm 5'9". It was like maybe about 5'7" up on its haunches. It had a narrowing to its nose with large openings, like a horse nares, like a horse opening, for the nose. So the holes,
it's coming together.
Yeah, the holes kind of took up the whole end of the face. And it had rabbit ears, but they were on each side of its head like the FTD man, and they were turned backwards, grazing over the shoulders of this thing. The feet were fluttering so fast underneath it that it was like a fluttering movement. And it shoots down the hall, and I stood there frozen. I thought, I was beyond wetting my pants, but I just stood there frozen, trying to make sense of what it was. I'm like, the paint fumes, even though it was low fume paint, and I haven't eaten in a couple hours, might have a little low blood sugar, and I was trying to rationalize it. And, maybe a motorcycle went underneath a light outside, and, because not all the window dressings were on, but there was no way for it to like come up from the bottom and cross like that. It would not have done that. So I'm standing there, and I start hearing my dog growling ferociously from the master bedroom. She had kind of nestled in between the two kids, and that's where she was. Pardon me?
She had enough.
Yeah, she was. Nothing had shot down in that direction to the room, and so I go down there because I don't want her to wake them up, and I try to soothe her, and she is standing at that door with that little German stance those schnauzers have, and her hair was standing up on her back. I have never ever seen her like that before. She was protecting those kids from something that she was very, very afraid of. And I petted her, and her ears went back for a second, and then they came back up. And of course, I don't see anything in the room. So I go ahead and I decide to take her out, and thinking maybe that she has to go to the bathroom or something. So again, I had to carry her back in, and she runs in and she nestles in between the kids. So when we woke up that morning, my daughter, woke up. I said, "How did you sleep last night?" And she said, I didn't. I felt like something was watching me, in the doorway all night long. And it was. And my son, he had bathed the night before, and he had on his Thomas Engine or whatever pajamas it was at that moment, Superman or something, and they were shorts. But he had bite marks on his legs. He had 3 bite marks, on his legs. They looked like dog bite marks, but they were smaller than, like, for instance, my dog Sally. Her mouth would have been too big to do those. And she wasn't prone to
Right.
biting anyway. And I asked him when he woke up, I said, Austin, what happened? Who bit you? Who bit your legs? And he's like, I don't know. And he's looking at them too and kind of touched them. They were purple. You could
He
count
had no memory of it.
yeah, because it happened during the nighttime. So, I got him ready for school and went ahead and took him to school. But even in that moment, I'm still kind of in denial. I'm like trying to rationalize. I stayed away from there for a couple of days. I go to work and, you start to kind of question yourself when you're away from something like that and thinking that I was a little ridiculous and stuff like that. So when I went back and saw that young man in the house coming up the stairs, I couldn't deny anymore. I'm like, okay, so we have a ghost in the house. This is what I've been seeing, da 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 da, sort of thing. And so I went ahead and
So you see I'm sorry. You see the young man, and the young man is the person you saw initially upon your first entry into the house, hanging in the entryway.
Yes. And again, it was verified by the next door neighbor. I'm sorry.
Go ahead. Between the split level and the 2 floors, right? Like, so he's hanging like, where the chandelier or whatever lighting was up there at the time would have been.
It was hanging from the wrought iron railing.
Oh, okay, the railing itself.
The stairs, yes.
Okay.
And
yeah.
Then I realized that we had a ghost. But when the young man who was my friend's cousin that was helping me do some of the renovations on the house called me, he told me that he couldn't stay at the house. He didn't want to be there unless I was there, and he left. And the way that the windows were, they were these crank kind of windows, and they opened like this instead of up and down.
Right. Okay.
So we had
kind of sideways, and you had to crank them open. Yep.
Yeah, and so they had these special kind of air conditioners that would fit into those windows that were kind of oblong shaped, and I had one of those in there to help dry the floor. And of course, the opening over the top of it was opened, and I was concerned. It was on a Friday. I worked the weekend. The bugs and stuff, or if it rained, water would come in there. So I had to go back to that house. And so I asked my neighbor, I said, hey, do you mind riding with me back to my house? I kind of wanted to show it to her anyway. And so she said, sure. So I started telling her on the way there about my suspicion that there might be a ghost in the house. And I said, do you believe in ghosts? And she says, oh, hell yeah, I believe in ghosts. And I said, well, I think there's one in this house. I appreciate you going with me. You do not have to go inside with me if you don't want to. I'll get the man across the street. And she says, oh, no, they don't, it doesn't bother me. I said, okay, fine. So we get there, and I'm trying to unlock the door. And of course, the thing's playing games with the lock, and I'm having trouble getting my keys out. And my friend is standing in the foyer, and she said to me, don't leave me here and let the boogeyman get me, ha, ha, ha. And they targeted her. The demons targeted her. We went into the house and pulled the air conditioners out and secured the windows. And then we went into the kitchen because I wanted to show her I had gotten some carved horse heads, Morgan horse heads, to go in my daughter's room. She wanted a wild horse theme, and I was going to hang the valance over her bed with those. And my friend had one of them in each of her hands, and all of a sudden she drops them to the counter. Now, I would fight God for my children. I don't know what parent would not fight God for their children.
Right.
And I swear on my children's lives, you can believe it or not, what I'm telling you is the truth. We were standing there. This sound started to come into the room of this buzzing, gurgling sound, kind of like a didgeridoo is the best way that I can describe it, but a little bit more.
A didgeridoo.
Yeah, that wah, 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 kind of with some like electrical sound in it.
Mm-hmm.
And the room kind of started to fill with this from ceiling to floor, like a wall moving towards us. And I didn't say anything about the sound because I figured I was the only one that was hearing it. But then my friend turns to me and she says, what's that sound? I said, can you hear that too? And she's like, yes, what is it? And I said, well, you remember I told you, that there's ghosts in the house. So we'll just look at these and we'll leave in a minute and we'll just go ahead and go. And she started screaming. She dropped the horse heads to the counter. Like I said, she had one in each hand. I'm standing right next to her. And she said, what is it? What is it? A spider bite. It burns. And So she's trying to pull her shirt around to see if a bug was on her. And I lifted up the back of her shirt, and she had a 4-inch claw mark between her shoulder blades. And it was actually even underneath the bra strap part of her back. And being a nurse, it's, you know, an initial response to a wound that's a claw mark like that. It's like a cat scratch, a single one. It was welting and starting to bead blood. So it was something fresh, because even if a wound, you know, if you pick the scab off, it doesn't go through that welting process again unless it's re-injured for some reason. And that usually doesn't happen. But so I'm watching it bead blood, and I'm like, what happened? Did you scratch yourself on the corner of the car door? You know, I mean, this lady was 300 pounds and couldn't even reach her bra strap back there. She had to have her boyfriend, you know, fasten her bra for her during the day. Literally, I mean, she could not have reached that area. So while I'm looking at it, all of a sudden she starts screaming, and she's like, it got me again, it got me again. And she then had another claw mark that was about 2 to 3 inches on her abdomen below her belly button off to the left-hand side.
Wow.
And so, yeah, and that wall was kind of like closing in on us. And I just told her, I said, go ahead and leave, go out the door. I'm right behind you. I had the wherewithal to make sure that the sliding glass door was locked. And then I left out the front door, and I'm like, I didn't even bother with the deadbolt. I just did the knob lock, because I figured anybody that wants to break into that house, it can handle itself. So, you know, it's like, so we ended up leaving. And at that point, that was when I came home and started searching for help. Started contacting paranormal groups. I had a whole list of churches to call the next day, which I did, and most of them referred me to the Catholics, and the ones that didn't refer me to the Catholics told me that if I was going to their church, that I wouldn't be having these problems, or because I was a single mother, I must be promiscuous or something. And
Oh my goodness.
yeah, drawing that kind of energy to myself. Yeah, and I'm like, you know what? I haven't even been out on a date in 4 years. What are you talking about? You know, I feel like on my kids. I don't have time.
Right.
So yeah, so you know, they always had these excuses, and so finally I did get a call back from a paranormal group. It was a paranormal group out of Georgia. The priest was Andrew Calder, who has since passed away, but he's an Episcopalian priest that did come out. But before that, and in the process of that, I had to reach out to people that actually knew me. You know, I had I was raised Presbyterian. So I had a Presbyterian minister that knew me as a person, that knew that I wasn't woohoo, you know, out there. Yeah, so I started to tell him the story, and he believed me. And he told me, he said, you know, I went to my church to explain to them what your issue was, and I ended up being more afraid of the Bible thumpers than I was of even hearing about the things in your house. So he made arrangements. I had actually contacted up to the Catholic diocese in North Carolina, and I had gotten all the way up to the Archbishop, who then told me that they didn't do like exorcisms on people anymore, and that once in a while they would do a blessing on the house, but they just really didn't do that kind of thing as much anymore. So so I ended up, you know, going with the Episcopalian priest, and the Presbyterian minister said to me, well, I have a friend of mine that's a Catholic priest that I went to college with. Let me call him and see if he'll help you. So he took me to meet the Catholic priest, and he was actually in the process of packing boxes to relocate. So he gave us a number of another priest, which comes in down the road. But anyway, obviously, you know, they did the clearing. The clearing didn't work. So I ended up having to get the Catholic priest. And that man, oh my gosh, I felt so sorry for him. He was so nervous in that house, because I had him start in the lower areas. And, you know, when you're around spirits a lot, you get used to seeing them. Like we were talking about the vapors, you know, you're like, oh, you know, there they are again, or whatever. But he was so frightened that he was trembling so bad that he almost dropped his Bible. And he was just squirting the holy water into the room while he was reciting things. And the initial clearing that I had done took hours. I mean, it took all day long. And this guy was in and out of that house within 20 or 25 minutes max. I mean, he literally came upstairs, went down the hallway, wouldn't even go into the rooms or the closets or the bathrooms, just sprinkled a little holy water from the doorway, squirted in there, recited his thing, and went out. He was ready to go. And he did not say one word to me on the way back to the Catholic Church. And I felt bad for him because he was getting out of my car so fast that he almost tripped on himself, just trying to get out and shut the door and left. So with that situation, it actually aggravated things more so than helped, because they were feeding off of his anxiety and his fear, which makes they feed off of that, and they become stronger and able to do more physical acts. So anyway, I
see.
Yeah, I ended up putting the house up for sale. The first set of people that I had come over, they had called, made arrangements while I was in the house, and they had called and said that they wanted to come and see the house. So we made an appointment for the next day, and my mom and I went over to the house an hour early so we could kind of stage the house. You know, we had cleaned everything had been painted, and we wanted to, you know, make it look a little bit homey with a plant or candle or something in there. And so my mom says to me, she looks at the windows and she said, "Lynn, did you tint the windows?" And I'm like, "No. What are you talking about?" Well, there were vertical blinds hanging on the upstairs windows, and I looked up there, I couldn't see the divisions of the vertical blinds. So I thought maybe I pulled them across, or my mom had when we were in there cleaning the day before. And then I looked down at the lower window where the garage was, and it was covered in flies. But it was only covered in flies like halfway, with a few hit and miss down towards the bottom part. But those upstairs windows were covered in flies. They're so thick that you could see the movement, but you couldn't see through them. So I said, "Mom, you know, those are flies." And she said, "Oh my God." So we went to go into the house expecting to be swarmed by flies. And fortunately, those flies were up against the windows wanting to get out themselves. But, you know, the thing is there was nothing in that house to draw those flies. The toilet was flushed. We didn't leave any garbage in there, no cleaning rags, no food. Nothing was left in there. Nothing smelled bad. Nothing, you know, that would draw all of those big, huge flies. I mean, there were no maggots. There was no evidence of hatchlings. These were big, fat, you know, adult flies, and they left extra.
Oh my God.
All over the window
and
frame.
Of course, that brings about, again, the kind of the Amityville thing, right? And we've seen this, and we also saw this at the Lizzie Borden house and several other hauntings. And why, you know, this the kind of Lord of the Flies Beelzebub thing would go from haunting to haunting, you know, is one of the things we like to dig into when we try to understand the how and the whys of these things. I just wanted to let you know, we normally schedule from 9 to 10 o'clock. We can go a little later. There's a show on after, so I know we're trying to fit a lot in and a show at the pan. When we do wrap up, we can, you know, also do some audio and put that in a Dark Horse Paranormal podcast for people to download. So I just want to let you know that. And,
I like you. It's okay. I'm trying to abbreviate as much as I can to get.
I know. I feel like we have a lot to say, and you know, for our listeners out there that are enjoying the story, you know, we will be putting this into like a full audio podcast. I still have our last interview. I have an extended one, in fact. We may put that all together, or maybe in 2 parts or something to that effect, so people get the full effect of the story, because it is a chilling and very haunting story.
Yeah, it is. It is. When my mom and I finally went into the house, there were 3 windows in the breakfast nook area that we had to remove the screens from in order to shoo the flies into the house, because the windows were painted shut on the outside and the cranks were broken. And there was no way, there were no flaws, no openings, no dents. There wasn't any way for those flies to get in between the screens and the window panes. And so I had to take the screens off and to let the flies fly in the house so that we could usher them out. And of course, these people were supposed to be coming within an hour of time, so we were racing the clock. And fortunately, they had called and rescheduled for the next day. Something came up for them, and I rescheduled them while I was sitting in my car. So the next day, my mom and I go over 2 hours early to make sure that everything's okay with the house this time. And when we went in, everything was perfectly fine, and the people finally arrived. And it was this young couple, and they had 3 children, and 2 of the children were with them. And they're like, "Oh, well, I used to live in this neighborhood. Grew up in a house just like this. We'd love to raise our children here." And so again, it was a deja vu moment in the sense that those children were running down the hallway, picking out their bedrooms, just like mine had done before. And then they came up and they asked if they could go downstairs. And the parents, I said yes, and they said yes. And again, they were back up within about 5 minutes, and their eyes looked like deers in a headlight. And I hear the little girl saying to the little boy, whatever their brother's name was, Tommy or whatever it was, "Tommy can have the creepy room downstairs. I'll take the little room," because there was one small bedroom upstairs. So,
Tommy.
yeah. So they
Poor
saw.
Tommy gets stuck in a creepy room. That's not good.
That's right. And he wasn't the one that was with them. But the thing was, is I realized in that moment as a mother that I couldn't sell the house to someone with children. And of course, keeping in mind with this too, a lot of people would be like, "Well, I would have been out of there." Well, I had a mortgage. I mean, I was, it's not like I could just drop and run. Believe me, I couldn't afford to pay for 2 places to live as a single mother and support the demons in their home. I would have preferred to burn it to the ground, but I couldn't do that either. So I did everything that I could to try to have it cleared. But the people that ended up buying the house were a retired couple from Florida. And when it was a cash buy, and we were coming down the stairs after signing some papers, getting ready to exit out of the foyer through the double entry doors, and I exited first, and I overhear the wife saying to the husband, "Why did you push me?" And he said, "I didn't push you." She said, "Yes, you did." And he said, "No, I'm 3 steps back from you. I can't even reach you, from where I'm at. I didn't push you." And in that moment, my conscience, I could not do to them what had been done to me, although I understood. Right. So I said to them when they came out, I said, "Do you believe in ghosts?" "No, we are Baptist. We don't talk about those sorts of things. We don't entertain those sorts of things. We are protected." I'm like, okay. If they had asked me, I would have told them the truth. So this is where we get into omnipresent, what happened next. About 6 months later, I was driving down the interstate, and there was a backup of traffic, so I pulled off the most immediate ramp that there was to avoid it, and it just so happened that it was the exit that would have normally gone to that house. And because I never actually moved in there, I didn't know the area around there, so I'm trying to figure out another way to get back on the interstate and get around this accident buildup that was on the interstate. And I ended up getting to a street that was a crossroad with the street from the house that I used to own. And I ended up having to take that street because at least I knew how to get back to the interstate from there. So I was kind of dreading going past the street, but yet, part of me was kind of curious too. And I'm driving past the street, and it's the second one in on the left. So you can kind of see it from the road, and out of my peripheral vision, I see that there's a sign in the front yard. Well, where it was positioned, I wasn't sure if it was in the neighbor's yard or in their yard because it was kind of close. But curiosity got me. I had to know. So I went ahead and I went to the next street, and I pulled in and turned around, and I said a little prayer. "Please protect me. Please don't let the people come out and see me passing their house. I don't want them to invite me in because I definitely don't even want to have to pull in the driveway." And so I went ahead and I turned down the street, and sure enough, it was a for sale by owner sign, and my heart just dropped. I felt so bad.
There it is.
Yeah, I had hoped that
Out.
I'm sorry.
Yeah. Yeah. It sounded like something got to them. Something was convinced. Now, I know in our last interview, we talked about them being a bit, or not the people that would move in, but the entities that were in your house that maybe were attributed to like a ley line or something along those lines.
Yes. Yes. One of the people that came to clear that actually, and thank you for bringing that up, the young man was actually freed from the house. An Indian lady had come in, and you know, when you go through something like that, you have to step out of the box because it's an out of box issue. And the things that she talked about were bizarre, but they were bizarre enough that I understood them because I could relate to what she was saying, if that even makes sense. And so when she came in, the young man was released during a ritual that she was doing, and she asked me to go and open the sliding glass door, and that young man ran past me so fast into the light that was shining in the window that day. And so at least that part got done. But she had made mention that if my house had been built 3 feet over from where it was, that it would not have been haunted. And she mentioned that the house catty corner across the street and the one behind it were haunted. And the thing is in the 8 months that I lived in the house, that one house that was catty corner was a rental, and it literally changed tenants 4 times. People would move in there. It was a nice house, and all of a sudden now they're moving out. So
yeah, that's really crazy. Now, this woman that came in, I know Kristen was trying to ask you, and I think we might be having a little bit of an audio issue. It was this a Native American, like a medicine type woman that came in?
She was part, I don't remember what type of Indian that she said that she was, but she was like half and half of Indian, and it was something that she did. And she told me that what I had in the house was called a hell dog, which was a higher
hell
level
dog.
demon. Yes, a hell
Okay, yeah,
dog.
all right, pointing it out.
Yeah, and she said the other one was a lower, was not as high. You know, you go backwards the other way, not as low level, which would be a higher level of a demon. And when I made the comment just out of nervousness, why is it so ugly? And she says, well, it's not ugly where it comes from. So, it just, it turned out that, we weren't able to get the things. There was some interference from a friend that was doing some Reiki and energy shifting that kind of, I think, reopened some things that shouldn't have been opened. But so I'm not sure if that actually got them out and then the lid was reopened, so to speak, or if it didn't work. But the bottom line being is that I ended up having, to move regardless. I mean, I even had the Episcopalian priest telling me, no, you have to stand your ground. It's your house. And I told him, I said, look, I mean, my kids had gotten attacked at that point. One of their friends had gotten attacked at one point coming into the house down those stairs. And I told him, I said, what kind of a mother, would I be if my kids are coming to me in the night saying there's something under my bed or in my closet? And there really is, or maybe in bed with them. And you can't protect them, that they're running into the bedroom to get in with you and you've got something pulling the covers off. You can't, there's no way. It's one thing to have to deal with criminals at large, but it's another thing to have to deal with something that you can't see. They would have put me in the hospital claiming that I had mental disorder and put my kids in foster care. You know what I'm saying? So
sure.
It just, it was just it was a bad situation. But something that was kind of interesting about it is that it was a for sale by owner sign. When I got onto their street, I was trying to be very inconspicuous. So I turned my radio off. I'm kind of hunching down in my car, driving past, and I noticed that the big giant Archangel Michael statue was still in the people's yard facing the house that I sold across the street. And so I went down and I turned around, and when I came back up onto the house, my radio in my car turned on full blast. Blaring full blast. I could not get it to turn off. I couldn't get it to change channel. I couldn't get it to turn down. So I sped up my car. I left skid marks. I got off that street so fast because I didn't want to draw attention to myself and have people looking out their window, with me having the radio blare in front of the house.
Right. You wanted to get out of there.
Yeah, I know, that's right. So once I got off of the street, the radio shut itself off. So to me, it was kind of like a calling card of them letting me know that they knew I was there and wanted me to know that they were also there. So I did not go back at that point. I wanted to know, the people that sold it to me couldn't live there. I couldn't live there. Then these people that are just, golden, with God in that sense, they couldn't manage to live there. I'm assuming that was the reason that it was, up for sale. I mean, it could have been something else, but I'm assuming that that's what it was. And it would seem logical that that's what it was. But anyway, so I decided to find out from the people that sold the house to me. So I went through the county records and I came across two or three people with the same name and narrowed it down. I sent them snail mail letters and asked them to, if they had owned the such and such an address home before, would they please contact me? And I did get a call a couple of weeks later from the guy that he and his wife had sold me the house. And he called me, he said, what can I do for you? And I said, I wanted to ask you a question. He says, okay. I said, did ever anything peculiar happen, while you were living in the house? And he says, well, what do you mean by peculiar? And I said, like it's haunted. And he got he said, haunted? Really? I said, yes. And he said, well, I think you need to talk to my wife. So I had asked him to have her call me back. And she did. She called me back, it was a little bit of time later. I didn't think that she was going to call. And finally I get this call and this woman is crying on the phone. I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry that we sold you that house. And I told her, I said, it's fine. I just wanted to compare some notes and get some validation, here. And she told me, she said, the reason why we were late to that closing is because my husband and I got into an argument, about the fact that she found out that I had children. And she said, no, we can't sell it to her. But it was too late. And so she started,
Wow.
she started to, go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, I did. I know. I just find that fascinating when you relate to the closing because they truly didn't want to sell it knowing it was haunted, which actually answers another question I was going to have for you. And that was, do you think you had anything to do with the haunting? It sounds like it was really the property. It was really the ley lines. Those things existed. A portal like that had existed for quite a long time before you came around.
Exactly. And
I'm sure it exists today, unless was there any sort of conclusion to it, or does it remain
well,
the portal?
I don't know. Sometimes the blessings and things have a little bit of a time frame that they take to actually take full effect. So I'm hoping that that eventually did happen, but I don't know. But the thing is the woman was telling me that when they moved into the house, that house practically ruined their marriage. She said she had a little girl that was 4 and a boy that was just barely turned 6, and she said that her daughter would come up from the downstairs area and have these weird bruises on her and sometimes scratches. And she'd ask her, and the little girl would be talking about the things in the house, and parents are like, oh, with that age they have invisible friends. But she was talking, when she would describe these invisible friends, they were horrific sounding, and so they started to be a little bit concerned, but not overly concerned. But then she would come up and she had like these bruises and scratches and stuff on her. And the mom asked her point blank, she's like, what happened? And she said, the monsters downstairs don't like me. And she would blame them for doing the scratches on her. And then the little boy had gone to school. He was like in 1st grade. And, they asked you to draw a picture of your house and your family. And so he drew this picture of the house, and he had these 3 other big teeth, nasty looking monsters next to the family with the house. And when the family asked and the teacher asked what those were, he said, those are the monsters that live in my house.
Yeah,
So
if I remember, they had like features too, right? There was something weird about what the child described them as looking like. They weren't human.
Yeah, the one man, I guess, looked human, but the rest of them did not. There was a second gargoyle-looking thing that actually looked like one of those flying monkeys off of Wizard of Oz with bumps all over its head. But
For that.
it was. I can hardly hear you. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, sorry, we're having a little bit of an audio issue. Yeah, a lot of clicking.
Okay.
That is the one that sat in the lotus position.
Is that the one that sat in the lotus position? Because we remember we talked about that.
Yeah.
Yes, and that was and also that was the one that entered into the kitchen one day when I was in there, and it seemed like there was a fire in the wall, and all of this like gray basement smelling smoke or fog started bellowing up from the bottom of the wall and went as high as the ceiling and then started to come back down and condense. And that thing, it actually had long, slender legs. When it would crouch, it would rock. Its knees came up to its shoulder like almost like a frog, and it would rock there. And I saw that also one day when I was in the house, and that was horrible. It felt like my feet were in cement. I couldn't believe it. But what freaked me out the most is while that thing was sitting there, it was looking past me like something was behind me. And sure enough, I could feel the back of my hair raising up on my back. I knew that other demon was standing behind me. So I just prayed and bolted for the door. Grabbed my purse. I had my kid's little vehicle battery on the kitchen counter, and I left it there for 3 days and fried it, because I was not going back in there, for anything. But that was also terrible. But the lady was telling me that when they had moved into the house, that her husband was working a night shift to pick up some extra time, and that the lights were turning themselves on and off. They had an issue that the kitchen sink kept running water and would turn itself on and off, and this created a problem because when her husband would come home to sleep, they would get into arguments because he would ask her why she was knocking on the door while he was sleeping. And she's like, well, I wasn't even in the house when that happened. He says, oh, yes, you were, because I could hear you calling my name through the door. So this thing was mimicking her name and disturbing his sleep. And so they would fight about that. And then they would come out and find the water running in the kitchen, and he would accuse her of it. And she's like, no, I didn't do it. And it went back and forth, but it was a continuation of this thing until the man one day was actually laying in the bed. He and his wife had fought. She took the kids and the dog and moved back to her parents' house for a little while. So he was there all alone. And he said that he was laying there in bed one night, and, he actually felt something crawling in bed with him. And he thought that it was her, so he called to see if, whatever. Anyway, it's kind of combining with another thing that she told me too, but basically that he looked over, he could see the indentation, but nothing was there. So then he ran to the kitchen and found the water was running, and all of these things were happening that she was trying to explain that he was blaming her for. And they finally ended up moving into the parents' house for a little while. They had blessings done on the house. They actually had a church service being held in the house for a couple of weeks, out of a month, trying to, usher the things out of there. And she said that things seemed to quiet down for a while, and then they moved back in, and they ended up, she said it didn't take but, a couple of days for them to ante up again and start, doing what they were doing before. And they ended up, having to move out after 6 months. So, and then they stayed with the parents.
Yeah, clearings, cleanings, all kinds of things done. Nothing's working.
Yeah, they did too. And she
Crawling
said,
in bed.
yeah, she said that at one point that she and her husband were arguing, that his eyes turned totally black. And that's when she took the kids and the dog and went to her parents' house, because she was afraid that his
We've
eyes.
talked about a bit on the show is the sexual component that goes with that, with the bed. And part of it, I think, is you're in that kind of awake, not awake state. I think you're more vulnerable. The other part is the true, sex issue, and maybe a possible conception. We've talked about abduction phenomena, in pregnancies that have gone, just disappeared, and those kind of things, and the mother ends up seeing the baby in a jar and that kind of thing.
Yes.
And that does seem to be kind of demon related, it's just a bit more than the typical haunting where, okay, something was knocked off my counter and I heard, some kind of crying in the next room or something. It's a little bit deeper than that, right?
It is. And, some of the people believe too, and it can very well could be alien related. I know that I've had a couple of alien experiences with a client that I had that is also written about in this second book. So, it could be alien related. It could be demon related. They both do exist. They kind of take different avenues, but one, they both exist. So,
What are our perceptions?
Yeah.
Right.
Yes, exactly.
What
And,
are
that,
some-
and nobody's wrong here. You know, if they, you know, they're not wrong to believe in
I
aliens.
don't know.
They're not wrong to believe in demons. You know, so you know, everybody, they're on their own path. But she had made mention of that, and that they finally had decided at that point to sell the house. So, and that's where I came in. But the interesting thing too is in the second book is there's an area in there about mental illness and demonic attachments. There's an area in there about addiction and demonic attachments.
Mhm.
And when I went through my nursing rotation for the second time, I had been a nurse for many years, but I wanted to further my degree. And I had gone through, we had to go through the psych ward. So we had various psych wards in the county that we would rotate to. And there was one in particular that I went into that was an intake unit. So if you ended up staying in that unit, you had to sign papers that if you got hit or pushed or, you know, bitten or something, you couldn't hold the hospital responsible. But anyway, there were 8 nurses that day. I was one of them. We went in with our teacher, and this one young girl who was in her early 20s walks up and she points at me and she says, "You can help me. I know you can." And of course, I was kind of embarrassed and looking over my shoulder, hoping that she wasn't talking to me because it was a little embarrassing. So all of a sudden, the teacher came in and she said, "Don't make eye contact. Don't make eye contact with anybody in here." And she ushered us out into a different room. But I had requested to come back into that area with there were 2 nurses that could come back in there, and I got to be one of them. And so I'm sitting, they had these picnic tables that were wooden that were bolted to the floor for people to sit on so nothing could be picked up and thrown. And so I was sitting at one documenting my nurse's notes with the other nurse. And this girl comes over and she sits down next to me, and I'm looking at her and she's telling us that she's in there for schizophrenia, that she hears 25 voices, that there's one with a long nail that scratches the inside of her vagina. This woman was covered in scratches. She had them inside of her ear, coming out of her nose. They were in spots. She had on a tank top with little spaghetti straps, so you could see her back partially. You could see her chest area. She had scratches in areas that would have been impossible for her to have inflicted on herself. And I'm sitting there and I'm looking at her and she's telling her story, and I recognized those claw marks. They were exactly the same as the claw marks that my friend got while she was standing next to me in the kitchen of that haunted house. And so, you know, she said, "Oh, well, you know, the
Similar
nurse."
entity.
What's that? I'm
A
sorry.
similar entity. Yet I'm sorry about the audio issue. Can you hear me okay?
I can hear you okay. It's a little bit garbled.
It is. And it, you know, we've gone over, and I just want to just throw out this comment from Joshua Dixon says, "Dead serious, my girlfriend in Texas at the time was 6 months pregnant, woke up the next day and her womb was empty. She swears it was an alien who not only impregnated her, but came back for her daughter. I swear this is what she says." And what I am thinking is this second book is really pretty interesting. And we're getting into some deep stuff, especially when we talk about mental health. And we know a bit about this and some of the history, because it's not the first time this has come up, where mental health and possession, you know, cross lines. So we're right into the work of, say, Dr. Terrence Palmer, as among some other individuals. I would love to have you back. Can we do another date?
Yeah.
Instead of like just trying to do this in audio later, let's come back and let's try to clear up some of this audio thing and get back deeper into the second book, because this is really fascinating and I love where you're going with it.
Okay, and I have a book coming out in December that's about death, dying, and afterlife, and the actual events that occur on both sides of the veil that I'm able to see with a client. And I've got some really, really special things about that I think will give a lot of comfort to people that have terminal illness or have lost a loved one. That way, I think that it'll be a very popular book as well. So I'll come back as much as you want me to.
Let's do this again in December. With Christmas coming, I think the positive book will be really helpful to a lot of people out there that are struggling to hang on through the holidays. And I want to dig into the second book.
Okay, I'll come back. Let me know. Send me an email of what you got open and available, and I'll be happy to have that. Yeah,
What happened next? Just before we go, where can people find these books? I mean, we have Omnipresent. We loved it, which, by the way, begins with, I believe, is it a Lord's Prayer, or there's a prayer in front of it just to kind of bless you through that book, which I thought was great.
My mother had questions about that too. She's like, I've never had a book like this. I'm like, just read it and make sure that you say it, you know.
And it truly is haunting. Like, you know,
It
you're covering a lot of details, and I give you props because you went through as much as you could there in the time allotted. But there's more detail in the book, and you guys should get out there and read Omnipresent. Where can they find these books?
Omnipresent is sold through Amazon. The other two books that I'm going to be releasing, I'm selling directly from my website. Please be forewarned. I've had scammers. My book is worldwide. I actually had one girl in East Africa put her picture over mine and claim she was me. I've had scammers opening accounts through Venmo and Cash App as Omnipresent Lynn Monet. And I even have 2 people on LinkedIn who are posing as me as well. So I've had to go through a lot of red tape to get some of that undone. So the only way that I can guarantee that you will get your book is if you order it through my website. It comes directly from me. If there's any problem with it, I still am answering my own emails at this point. It's www.lynnmonet.com. And I will make sure that you get them. At this point, I'm not selling through Amazon these other 2 books as of yet. But I can't be responsible for people that have purchased books elsewhere and then they don't get them. If you purchase it from me, then I guarantee that you'll get your book. So,
Great. I put the link out in all our chats. That's the Facebooks and YouTube. LynnMonet.com, LynnMonete.com is the official place to get your books. And yeah, we look forward to doing this again. We love it.
Okay, great. Kristen, just shoot me an email and let me know what you've got opened, and we'll schedule. I'll look for it.
Absolutely. You're on.
Thank you so much for having me.
We'll chat with you in a minute. We're going to say goodbye. Next week, we're going to be doing some parent chat with Shay Carroll, and we're going to be talking about the investigation we did at the Wilson Castle in Vermont, which was super spooky. And we let some of that data out in Bigfoot and the Bunny, but we actually have a lot more. Yeah, we get a lot of stuff to go over. So it's going to be a lot of fun. This Saturday, Bigfoot and the Bunny, we're going to have Mary Helen Hensley on to talk with us. And yeah, it's going to be great. So thank you, everybody. I appreciate everybody in chat. Josh, Andrea, and Lynn, we appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you.